Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for 𝗪cie, we are brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. Blackhawks season is in the books. They had their exit interviews yesterday at Fifth Third Arena. Long day. And but all in all, a somewhat upbeat day. Would you not say?
I felt a different vibe at the end of this year than last year, which is weird to say because last year during the exit interviews, it was, we need to take the next step next year, right? And so the Hawks found themselves in the same place in the standings, second to last. But I think the last few weeks, how the last couple weeks developed for Chicago, a lot of these young players emerging, even the 3-0-1 finish down the stretch, and the way that it happened, like 𝗍𝗍 on a 3-game goal streak, Bedard with a 3-point game, 4-game point streak to end the year, saw glimpses of a lot of the younger guys. And I think it was the first time Chicago fans this season could get excited. And it's unfortunate because the season ended right when, as the excitement was starting to build, but I think that excitement is going to carry over into next year.
Yeah, like if you strictly go by the points and the standings, it's an extremely disappointing year. They're 9 points better than they were a season ago. Still in 31st place, second best chances to land the number one overall pick. But like you said, I feel differently because of the final few weeks of the season and seeing these young players that have been either prospects or recent draft picks, whether they've been in college, whether they were in Rockford, come up to the NHL level, get NHL experience, and many of them have performed at a very impressive level. Yeah, it does change the way you feel. And I honestly think the Montreal game, if Montreal isn't a buzz for 𝗻𝗻𝗯 and trying to clinch their playoff berth, and they're just playing out the string, I don't know if we feel the same way that we do today as far as being so positive about the finish. Because what do you take from games against Boston and Pittsburgh and, teams that are out of the mix or already had, in Ottawa's case, already solidified their playoff positioning? I think that Montreal game, being as close to a playoff game as you're ever going to experience in the regular season, having that city and that arena, Bell Center, electric the way it was, and as Kyle Davidson put it, the young players leaned into that. It would have been very easy to go in there with eyes wide open like, wow, I can't believe we're in hockey's mecca. And, just play out the string, 1, 2, 3, Cancun on 3, and just, skate off into the sunset, take the train to Ottawa and play that game the way it ended up playing out. Like the juice between Monday night at Bell Center and Tuesday night in Ottawa were completely different, and rightfully so. But the Blackhawks, they found themselves down. 𝗻𝗻𝗯 got on the board with an assist on the first goal, scored on the second. The place is up for grabs, and they fought back. And, again, how much are we going to make of game 81? But, when you watch the body of their work and you watch the different players that have been in and out of the lineup, and then you see that collection go to Montreal. They're playing for a playoff berth. They're fighting for their playoff lives. They didn't want it to go down in the last game of the season. And you prevented them from clinching. Again, I'll go back to Kyle. He said they leaned into it. They leaned into it, and they came out standing. And I think that on top of what we saw the final 6 weeks of the season puts this finish to the season in a little higher standing than it otherwise would be.
I agree. And I know the Ottawa game also wasn't pretty per se because the shot totals were so lopsided. But that was a game too where even Kyle Davidson had mentioned in his exit interviews, he's like, early in the year, we probably find a way to lose that game. And it's like the Hawks found a way to win the game. And
how many times, Charlie, do you say win with your B- game? Can you win with your B or C game? They won that game with their B or C+ game.
Right. And the encouraging part about both of those victories was it was the young players leading the way. It wasn't Nick Foligno scoring a couple goals and he was the driver of it. It was Connor Bedard with 3 points against Ottawa, setting up Frank Nazar for the overtime winner. It was Frank Nazar leading the way in Montreal with easily his best game in the entire NHL, then scoring the game-deciding goal in the shootout. It was just, there were a lot of things to get excited about. And I think the emergences of Frank Nazar and also how quickly Sam Rinzel was able to just log 26 minutes a night fairly effortlessly, in addition to the upside or the flashes that we saw from Artem Levshunov and even Oliver Moore to some level, just seeing the explosive speed that he has. That's encouraging going into next summer, because even like a month ago, it was actually funny hearing Kyle Davidson yesterday saying we didn't even know that Rinzel and Moore were going to sign until literally the morning that they signed, because they were still. So it's like you really don't know what the Hawks were going to be at the final few weeks of this season. But now that you can tangibly see the players and what their upside could be moving forward, I think that gets you excited for next season, knowing that you can pencil some of these players in, like Frank Nazar, into a top 6 role next year, knowing that you saw enough down the stretch from him to play a role like that. But also guys on the back end with Rinzel and Levshunov, you're like, man, if that's the 1-2 on Chicago's right side for the next 10, 15 years to come, that already gets you excited for the summer and what moves the Blackhawks can make, because they can build upon what they had just created over the final few weeks of this season.
Yeah, look, I'm thinking back to last year and the exit, and it was all about, okay, it's about Bedard's development. Everything we talked about when it came in regards to this rebuild, it centered around, rightfully so, 98. Well, now with the emergence of Nazar and Oliver Moore and Ryan Green entering and Sam Rinzel and Levshunov and 𝗻_nci𝗵𝗹 takes yet another step, and Korchinski continue, like, all of a sudden we're not solely talking about 98 and 98's development, because that is a lot to shoulder if you're carrying the hopes and dreams of a rebuild. We're actually tangibly talking about other pieces. And that's where I think my optimism comes. I was using the analogy on the radio. It's like, you can talk about redoing a house, stripping it to the studs and building it. The house takes on a different life when you start seeing the materials and the walls go up and the cabinets put in and the marble put down and the floor. Like, it's no longer just sitting in your driveway or at wherever it's at. It's literally, you're seeing it and you're like, all right, I can picture living in that. I can see, okay, that's what that looks like. And I think, when it comes to this rebuild, instead of just seeing 98 and his wicked wrister and where is he at in the development plan, we're talking about other people and other young players that have stepped up and they've gotten their opportunities and they look pretty promising.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And I think the exciting part too is going into next year. I mean, we'll see how aggressive the Blackhawks are in the free agency department and via trades. We expect them to be pretty aggressive. It's going to slot everyone down in their rightful positions. Like 𝗻𝗻𝗄 𝗏𝗃 and Ryan Donato finishing the season on the first line probably isn't ideal. But you see some, like the emergence of Frank Nazar and how well he did with 𝗵𝗶𝘃 𝗏𝗃. Like guys like 𝗏𝗃 and Donato, if he re-signs, and then Jason Dickinson getting back healthy. Like if you go into next year with a third line of 𝗏𝗃, Dickinson, and Donato, and maybe like even Bertuzzi, like in that position, you're like, okay, like the top 6 is starting to round itself out, and the slots of where player, like which roles each player is going to play next year are starting to get better versus them playing 2 notches higher in the lineup right now.
Yeah, they're more defined.
Yeah.
But the one thing I think we need to be careful about, and I think Foligno and Dickinson, kind of woed that thing down a little bit yesterday, was don't take too much out of a 9-game sample size from Sam Rinzel or Oliver Moore or the 𝗏𝗏 sample size, or because the reality is we've seen all these guys almost to a man, whether it was Nazar last year when he came in from Michigan, Slaggert when he came in from Notre Dame, like they popped, you're like, they were like, there was production. And again, it was smaller sample sizes, but then the reality comes, okay, Nazar gets called up in December. Now what's it like? Game 20, game 30, and then seeing Slaggert over a full 82 games. And all of these guys are going to experience the quote unquote grind of an NHL season. It's no longer riding the high of going from the NCAA Frozen Four to taking on McKinnon, Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, all in a week's span. And, adrenaline probably just like pushing you as you're seeing your childhood unfold in front of your very eyes. You're playing the game that you wanted to play your entire life, and you're playing against the players that you've been watching since you were a kid, some of them before you were born. And now it's like, okay, so I do think, while it's important that we saw these glimpses of what these players can be like and how they can perform on this NHL stage, we also got to consider where it was in the season, where some of these teams that they were playing at, where their minds were at, and let's see how that translates to the grind of a full 82.
Right. Like the honeymoon phase is going to fade going into next year.
Yeah.
And I think the promising thing for me is why I think there will be some sort of carryover next year is because the feel of the group is going to be different. Like there's likely going to be a new head coach. There's likely going to be more additions going into next season where there's going to be more energy. And because they have the experience to draw on from the final few weeks of this past season, I think there will be some excitement. So I think if the Hawks were like rolling back the same group next year, it's hard to kind of bottle up what they finished in the last couple of seasons and carry it over. But I just think going into next year, it's just going to have a different feel for many different reasons.
All right, let's get into some of the exit interviews. Let's start with Connor Bedard. Year 2 for him, 23 goals, 44 assists, 67 points in 82 games. When you look back at the season, and as I was talking about earlier, while the focal point has always been about 98, with that comes the constant microscope that he is under. And he went through that stretch where it was 𝗦𝗫𝗍 and then Biz, and then there was that JR thing around the Winter Classic where like he's getting shrapnel left and right. And again, some of that comes from being labeled a generational player. Some of that comes being the number 1 overall pick and everybody in a country knowing your name when you're 14 doesn't make it any easier to cope with. So like, I do feel like year 2, while he did not reach maybe some of the expectations that he would like to have seen on the ice and others expected to see, I do think he is in a meat grinder when it comes to the way he's looked at. And I do think the emergence of Nazar and these other players are going to help take some of that burden away. And the lazy narrative of every national game isn't going to be 98 and Bedard and where he's at and where does he stack up to McDavid and Makar and all these other top overall picks. It's going to be How's Bedard? How's Nazar doing? Who's this Sam Rinzel character that we didn't really know that much about, who has like moved up the depth chart and taken quantum leaps? Like, so I think that, you know, part of this is just being the number one overall pick and everything that he's accomplished at a young age. But I do think that, you know, 2 years of that takes its toll, especially when you're not turning 20 until July.
Right. Like he was still the third or fourth youngest player in the entire NHL this year. It was like him and
yeah, I think after Levshunov came up, he was third.
Yeah, exactly. So it still kind of puts it into context too of just how young he still is. I think if you asked him, he's disappointed with what his offensive production was this year. I think it was after he had set his career high, or whichever game it was where he surpassed his career high in goals. He was asked about it after the game. It's like, oh, you know, does that mean anything to you? And he's like, well, I played 14 less games last year than this year. So it's like he knows that he was expecting his offensive production to be higher. The one thing I left encouraging from Bedard's media availability yesterday is he's like, I know that speed is going to be an issue, or speed is going to be a primary focus for me going into the summer. He has massive legs for tree chunks, right? Like he is strong. That is not an issue for him. I think where I started to see him get knocked off pucks this year wasn't because it was a strength. It was because his speed slowed down. Like he would try to maneuver around forwards along the blue line, and he would often get knocked off the puck, not because for the lack of strength, but because his speed slowed down. So he wasn't able to have pull away speed. So I think hearing him talk about how he wants to get faster going into next year, I think should be encouraging for Chicago fans, but also for himself, not just because sometimes players can be prideful and they're like, nope, I'm going to stick to what I'm doing best. But he recognized I need to actually tweak something going into next year. And I expect Bedard to be much more effective in ways that we didn't see him consistency-wise this year.
Self-awareness, right? You know, ability to critique yourself, and you know, the analytics bear that out. As a rookie, I think he was in the 71st percentile when it came to, you know, speed. And I think this past year it was around 50 percentile. So, you know, that is a drop. That is, as he said, you know, I'm probably average in speed. I'm never going to be McDavid or McKinnon, but I can get a step on guys and create separation. You know, one thing that Anders wanted to do was get him the puck when he's moving, but what can he do to be a driver when he gets the puck and he isn't moving? How does he create some separation? And I have no doubt that when he focuses in on something, he is going to attack it, and you're going to see a difference. And so, A, the first thing is recognizing there's an issue. B is coming up with a game plan or a solution. And then C is implementing it. I think we're just on the precipice of starting C. And just like he handled, you know, I think the faceoff circle, that was one thing he took pride in, the steps he made the last couple months in the season at the dot. He said it yesterday, Charlie, I want to be a centerman in this league, and I know I needed to get better there. And we saw a step or two in the right direction.
Great players are always looking in the mirror to see how they can get 1% better. You know, we even saw it with Patrick Kane, where he wins 3 Stanley Cups, but then he goes to Ian Mack and says, I'm strong, I'm getting too big, but like I need to drop weight so I can get more agile and more like Kane. Whenever he was drafted, he was like maybe like barely 150 pounds. Like he was thin. He was like, and so he added on strength, but then as he continued to add on muscle, he was like, wait a second, this is detrimental to who I am as a player. I want to be fast. I want to be slick. I want to maneuver my way around defensemen. And so I think Connor can learn a lot from that too, where he doesn't need to be built like Sidney Crosby, because Crosby, he plays his game down low. He's a different kind of player. with Bedard, he still, I think Bedard was among the NHL leaders this season in zone entries. Like, he was still a guy that, like, he's going to skate by players and he's going to put defensemen on their heels because he thinks the game at such a high level. So if he can pair that with getting a step faster next season, maybe shaving off some of the weight that he doesn't need just to become more agile and quicker and lighter on his skates, I think that's going to go a long way for his development.
Couple things, no official word yet if he's going to play in the World Championships. It sounds like he's probably not going to play in them. If I had to wager a guess right now, he is eligible for a contract extension once the new year starts on July 1st. And so Thursday at the season-ending interviews, Bedard dispelled that narrative that he wants to leave Chicago. And it began when he was asked about a possibility of an extension in July.
Yeah, I guess no real preference for me. It's something I haven't, really put too much thought to be honest, just with the season and you're playing and focusing on that. But I mean, I've said it 100 times. I love it here and I have a great relationship with Kyle and everyone. And, I don't even know like what to expect with that. So, obviously you have the conversation and stuff and see, but, I'm not too worried about any of that, Like I said, great relationship, and I know that I want to be here for a long time. So I don't think that's something that I'm thinking about too much right now.
Does it trouble you that narrative has been out there that people speculating whether you want to continue being a Blackhawk because of the the troubles this franchise has had?
No, I think unless you're in the room and around all of us, I think. I'm a pretty mild-mannered guy, and, if I look a little sad on the bench or something, maybe people can take it out of context. But, I've said it so many times that, I love being here and the city, the people. Even before I got drafted, I was embraced like, one of their own. So it's a special sports town, and, we got a lot of great players coming up, great people, and, I think anything can get said to me. I mean, I don't really look at that. I don't really see a whole lot of that unless someone shows me. And but I just think, I think people that know me know that I love to be here and really trust the direction we're going. And hey, if you get the first overall pick, you're probably not winning the cup the next 2 years. So it's an understanding of where you're at, and we're going out there to win every game. But at the end, we're in a process of growing and learning, and that's an exciting time. And when you lose, it makes winning a lot sweeter once you get there. So we're excited for that.
All right, so I think he said it clear as day now a handful of times. He likes it here in Chicago. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming. I just assume it's other markets that would love to see him play for their team, and that's where these things start. But look, all indications have always been that he likes it here. If you take a snapshot of him on the bench after a shift that he wasn't particularly thrilled about, and you want to change that as to how he feels about being with a team, that's on you. That's the way I see it.
That was easily the mic drop quote of the entire exit interviews yesterday, because there had been some kind of like irresponsible prominent NHL people that have been talking about like, oh, the Hawks got to surround Connor with talent or else he's going to want to leave. And it's like, where's this coming from? Like, we're around the team every day and we're around Connor every day. We've never gotten that vibe at all. And I'm happy that Connor addressed it, because he didn't have to. Like, he could have just kind of let it kind of shrug off like, yeah, I don't listen to the outside noise. But I think it was getting to a point where he was probably getting asked about it from people around him, and he's like, where is this coming from? And I love that Connor addressed the body language specifically. Like, I'm mild-mannered, so sometimes you see me sat on the bench, it gets taken out of context. It's just like, boom, yes. And it's like, when I get asked that by friends and from fans, I can now just send them that link. Be like, hey, did you watch this interview? I don't have to explain anymore. And so it was nice to see that Bedard reiterated his commitment towards the Blackhawks in the long term. Now the question is, what does his contract look like, which is going to be a summer conversation. We don't need to get into that now, but like, I think it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to come at some point. And now it's just, we can move our attention to what that contract is actually going to look like.
Right. And they will, and that's a good transition into Kyle Davidson. But let me just put, a bow on Bedard. He said he's going to go back to Vancouver, hometown, probably spend most of his time there, go through training there. He also said, I asked him the question about, has he been picking the brains of other teammates or players around the league when it comes to attacking his to-do list, when it comes to accelerating and acceleration and speed. And he's like, yeah, probably too much for some, but like, I love that he is, he said, it's about evolving as an athlete, right? You don't just stay with the exact same workout regimen and maybe the same exact training staff. And, you look to evolve and get better, and you pick the brains of those that have come before you or that are currently in the league, and you have seen them take a big step in their development. How did they do it? Who did they go to? I thought Ryan Donato gave some glimpses to, he's 29 years old, and talked about like how his offseason game plan has changed in recent years, where he would, just be on the ice for, X number of days. And then he's like, you know what? I need to scale that back, but I need to work on edge work on Tuesday and Thursday and spend all that time on edge work. And then, so like, and I asked him if Connor was talking to him about it, and he said he had. So I love the dialogue. We always talk about, deep down, he's a hockey nerd. This kid is going to leave no stone unturned when it comes to trying to make himself the best hockey player he could possibly be.
Yeah, which is great because he's showing the humility to even ask players that, like a McKinnon or McDavid, I'm sure when he's skating with them in the summer and they're going to one of those camps together, he's peppering their ear off, and he's not like, nope, I'm just going to stick to what's made me good. It's like they're always looking for new ways. Even the Kane example that I brought up earlier, like Kane had won 3 Stanley Cups, then he adjusts his entire offseason regimen, drops 15 pounds, and he goes and wins the Hart Trophy that year. Like, so even he was like, okay, I did what I was successful to what got me here, but I'm also looking for ways to lengthen my career and also elevate what makes me good as a player. And so that's got to get fans excited too, that Bedard is, like you mentioned, flipping over every rock to make sure that he has the best possible information and implement that in his own offseason regimen.
Kyle Davidson met the media as well, talked about the tumultuous season, both on the ice, off the ice, in his personal life. He always talks about I do like how that hockey ops department, whether it's Norm or 𝗵cie or it's a collective group that have voices and weigh in, and then they make, ultimately the decision is made by Kyle, but he's not afraid to ask for input from all of those that are in the hockey ops department. And, he went through a lot with changing coaches. I don't think it can be overstated, Charlie, the importance of moving Seth Jones, not only for getting what looks to be a franchise goalie in return and a number 1 pick, and only having to pay 25% of the freight going forward, but what that did to the rest of the roster. It opened up, you're the player that played in the most situations on your team. You now had the ability to call 𝗏𝗏 up, to have Rinzel play on the top power play unit, have those players play the penalty kill and play these huge minutes. If Seth is still in the mix, how much would we have gotten to see of 𝗏𝗏 or Rinzel? You could argue Artie may not have been called up.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's not even a knock on Seth because he got moved to a situation where he wanted to be that. So it was a win-win for both sides. It was his call. And, Right. It was his call. The Hawks, the Hawks were able, they were able to make a deal that was best for them too, while not just getting rid of, dead weight in their minds. Like it was a really nice deal for both sides. And it's a great point because it's funny because we were doing our NHL awards, which is due today. So like I have I was just kind of looking for rookie defensemen. Like you have to pick 2 rookie defensemen, and we're looking at the second one. I was like, let me sort by ice time to see which defense. And like Sam Rinzel is it was 26 minutes, and like the rest of the rookie defensemen were 22 or whatever. Like if it wasn't Lane Hudson, so it was geez, this guy was playing so many minutes. Even though it was a small sample size, but it's there's no way he would have gotten those minutes if Seth is still on the roster. There's just no way.
No, absolutely not. And so, it was important that they parted ways with Taylor Hall, and, they moved on from Smith. They took care of Peter Mrazek. They handled the Brody situation. I mean, that guy didn't play the last 2 months plus of the season. You never heard, a rumbling out of him. Probably did him a solid, not sending him down and just kind of paying him off. How they handled the Maroon and the Martinez exits and their retirement announcements. All in all, I thought there's a lot to be impressed with how it was handled. Again, we don't love where they are in the standings, but now comes to the decision, which I think is the next big decision, is who's going to be the coach of this team going forward. Will they stay the course internally with Anders Sorensen, who I thought did an admirable job? Not an easy situation to be tapped on the shoulder when you're running a successful AHL program and have a really good connection with Luke Richardson. And then you're replacing him. You're trying to implement some system changes to generate more offense. You're trying to win hockey games. You're trying to develop players. And you're trying to do all of that on the fly when the schedule doesn't exactly line up with a lot of practice time to implement all these changes. So I credit Anders for being thrown into the fire, and I think doing an admirable job.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing that stood out to me was hearing Connor Bedard talk about the importance of Anders Sorensen giving Bedard one-on-one time when he took over to get his offensive game back on track. He said they spent a lot of time talking, video sessions, practice. Sorensen was talking about how they both are hockey junkies, so they're able to kind of relate in that way. And so if nothing else, I thought Sorensen did a great job of getting Bedard back on track and getting him feeling good about his game for the rest of the season. Were there moments throughout the year where it really dipped, like there was kind of that little coach's bump, but then, it just kind of felt like things normalized again as far as the wins and losses were concerned. But I thought if nothing else, Sorensen did a great job of helping get Connor back on track. And we were talking to Kyle Davidson yesterday, and he says no matter what happens with the coaching search, whether the Blackhawks do go externally, Sorensen is going to remain in the organization. Like, they think very highly of him. The question would be does he go back to Rockford and continue to groom some of those young prospects that he has his fingerprints on to be the Rockford IceHogs head coach again? Or does he stay at the NHL level and continue to work with them kind of more in a developmental role? I have no idea. That's going to sort itself out. I kind of like the idea of sending him back to Rockford because Mark Eaton is there right now, and Mark Eaton is their assistant GM of player development. So that's not a position where it was like Derek King gets hired by Chicago, stays on the staff, and they had Sorensen to fall back on. Like, Eaton's going to go back to his role as being assistant GM of player development. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Sorensen went back to Rockford, assuming that he has the humility to do that and not. And it sounds like he does. Like he said, I'm a team-oriented guy. I'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Sorensen's going to be part of the Swedish coaching staff, right?
Yep, at the Worlds.
Worlds. So, he's going to take his NHL experience. He's going to coach for a few weeks on the international stage. I'm sure that people have looked around the league at his body of work and whether they think he's ready for another head coaching job or being a developing assistant on another NHL. Like, his stock has gone up for sure throughout this experience. But again, it does sound like when it comes to Eaton, when it comes to Sorensen, Davidson, Campbell and company, everybody seems to be on the same page, and that they'll find something that is equitable for all parties and puts everybody in the position that they feel most comfortable in.
For sure. And rightfully so too. Like, I think obviously Sorensen is going to get consideration for it to be the permanent head coaching position, but I think the Hawks are going to go external and they want to. I think the Hawks are probably going to realize that Sorensen is better suited when he's working closely with some of the developmental side of the game versus managing all these other. You're managing an entire NHL team. You're managing the personalities. What's practice going to look like the next day after? Like all that stuff that just takes you away from the strength of what makes Sorensen a really good hockey-minded coach. And so I wouldn't be surprised if obviously Sorensen's going to stay within the organization, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to utilize him where his strengths are. Okay,
so the coaching search. Kyle Davidson was asked whether or not head coaching experience is important for the candidates that he is going to interview upcoming. On the heels of Jeremy Colleton, Luke Richardson, and Anders, the last three candidates, you can put Derek King in that mix as well, did not have NHL head coaching experience. And you tend to go oppo when you've gone a certain route a few times and you haven't got the results that you wanted. But there is a candidate that may overcome the lack of NHL head coaching experience with his experience at the international level and with his program at Denver. That's David Carle. And I had NHL insider Frank Seravalli on the CHSN Countdown Live show and asked him the Blackhawks process of hiring their next head coach. And here's what Seravalli had to say.
Well, Pat, the Hawks have had about 5 months to put their list together, and there's one name at the very top that's been circled that has separated himself from the rest of the pack, and that is David Carle from Denver University. Look, this is a guy that's had incredible success at both the college and international stage, two-time NCAA national champion, back-to-back World Junior gold medals. At the age of 35, the Alaska native is the it guy in this coaching cycle for the National Hockey League. And here's the thing. The Hawks are going to want to get after him, but they're not going to be alone, Pat.
No, and you recently had David Carle on your podcast, and there's a lot of attention being shown his way, and for good reason. Is it a foregone conclusion that Carle will leave the NCAA ranks and Denver?
No, it's not. He's got a fantastic job, one that he could have for life. He's been at Denver since he was a teenager. He's a guy that has grown up in that program, has had great tutelage. He could stay there for the next 35 years, be an incredibly well-paid college coach and call it a career. And that's going to be the push and pull throughout this process, but you don't have to believe me. Take a listen. Here's him directly.
It would need to be a life-changing opportunity, in a lot of ways, but it also needs to be a team with a vision that aligns with what I see as it relates to winning. And I think the way coaches are recycled through the NHL obviously is, I personally don't believe it's the best way to have success, to pull the trigger quickly and to try and build long-term sustained success. I think a patient vision where you're working collectively with a group of people, players and management, coaches all alike, I think that's the way forward. And the NHL is not really that right now. And so maybe it changes into that, or maybe we can be a part of that change.
All right, so you heard from 𝗂𝗏𝗧 and you heard there from David Carle as well. Not a foregone conclusion that he is going to leave Denver. He's got a very good situation. His brother starred there. He tried to play there, had a medical issue that was discovered, ended up beginning his coaching career, I think at 18 at Denver, left, came back, worked under Montgomery. He has been now the head coach for a while. He's won 2 natties. He has run an excellent program. He has won the world championships, junior championships with Team USA the last 2 years, something that had never been done before. If you watch any of the videos of how he interacts with his team, very, very impressive, Charlie.
Yeah, I've always said when the Blackhawks made the coaching change and we're going to open up the search in the offseason, the preference would be to hire an experienced NHL coach, but I don't think it's a requirement or mandatory. And I leaned on the experience side all along. Like, I think it would be wise of Chicago to get an experienced guy, but I wouldn't do it at the risk of getting the 4th, 5th, 6th guy on their list just because he checks the experience box. And then you have a guy like David Carle who could be the next best thing where you just kind of totally disregard him because you wanted to go to the experience route. And I think for me, the encouraging thing about David Carle is his experience not only developing prospects, but also winning while doing so. Like winning 2 national titles at Denver, winning back-to-back gold medals with Team USA. And oh, by the way, Nazar, Rinzel, Gavin Hayes, Oliver Moore were on that team. And he also coached Aiden Thompson at Denver. So like there are Blackhawks ties as well. And so when David Carle says, I'm not going to leave Denver for just a situation, like I think of teams like, the New York Rangers or the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Philadelphia Flyers. Like if you're one of those teams and you're looking at they make a coaching change this summer and they're interested in a guy like David Carle. If you're David Carle, do you look at the New York Rangers? On paper, you can see they got a bona fide number 1 goalie in Shesterkin, number 1 defenseman in Adam Fox. They have Panarin. They have all these young guys. But is that a team that's set up for long-term success? I'm not sure. The one thing that stood out to me in Carl's interview with 𝗂𝗏𝗧 on his podcast was he said, I'm looking for a team or however he phrased it, with a patient vision. I mean, that screams the Chicago Blackhawks. And so I think that would line up with him where he would have a few buffer years to get his feet wet in the NHL. And right when they're ready to contend, David Carle can be like, all right, I'm ready. I have my bearings as an NHL head coach. And oh, by the way, I also want to point out 2 NHL head coaches that have won Stanley Cups in recent years that started with 0 NHL experience, and it's Jon Cooper and it's Jared Bednar. So it's like you don't want to talk yourself out of a guy like David Carle who could be the next Jon Cooper or Jared Bednar.
How about Spencer Carberry?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's another one. And
he's a candidate for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, and like, so you don't want to talk yourself out of a guy like that just because, you could go the experience route. And so I love what I've been hearing as far as David Carle's potential interest, I guess, in a situation like Chicago, and also the love feels mutual on Chicago's end. So we'll see how that navigates over the next few weeks.
It feels like a very Bears Ben Johnson-like situation, minus interviewing 20 people before you hire Ben Johnson. It feels like David Carle is their Ben Johnson, top of the list, and they're going to hold off on doing all the other interviews before they figure out if a marriage is possible between these two parties.
For sure. And the one thing I actually like about David Carle more than I do Ben Johnson in this situation is that David Carle's resume is winner, 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 winner. Johnson kind of had to bounce around all these lateral positions first, and then he became the hot commodity. It's like David Carle was like, got promoted to Denver head coach, won 2 national titles, then became the coach for the under-20 World Junior Championships, won 2 gold medals. It's like, oh, this guy's a winner, but he's also very good and very personable. So I think that would get Chicago fans excited too.
All right, let's wrap this up here because we're going to make some playoff predictions. Alex 𝗦𝗡, he's going to go to the Worlds. Good to see that. Really solid year from Alex. Everything he was asked to do, he took on. That included being quarterback of power play 1, which he had never played at any level really. And, ate up all those minutes when Seth was injured and when Seth originally left. So kudos to 𝗦𝗡. Ryan Donato's extension, it sounds like, again, everybody's on solid footing. Ryan wants to stay. The Blackhawks would like him to stay here. Can they come to a common ground? We will see. But the climate feels like it's probably conducive to an extension getting done. We'll see.
Yeah, it feels like there's mutual respect and there's mutual understanding that both sides want to get this done. I wonder, though, how much the emergence of some of these young players like Nazar and Oliver Moore coming in and has kind of complicated the contract extensions because they don't want to promise Donato a spot maybe in the top 9 or top 6 next year when he might fall into a bottom 6 role and then you're paying him $4 million a year.
Great point. These are good problems to have.
Absolutely.
Tough decisions, right?
How about last thing? How about Spencer Knight talking about his Chicago quest to his housing options? It's like, why are the trains above ground here?
I asked one question. I just said, he said he got his kind of ducks in a row quickly on the ice because he agreed to playing games like right away, and that like settled him in a little bit and took kind of all the craziness of having to switch teams and everything that goes along with that. It kind of put that away and it allowed him just to kind of focus on hockey. I said, okay, well, how is life outside of the rink been going? Like where you live, getting acclimated to Chicago. He went 3 minutes on, and honestly, he felt like every 20-something that's looking for a place in Chicago, and you could kind of feel, the process that is, finding, is it on a one-way street? Is it near the L? What is it a duplex? Is it, it was pretty funny. It was like real talk from a real person dealing with real people issues.
It was the best answer of the entire day yesterday outside of the Connor Bedard stuff. And because he literally checked every box of what was, oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's a good point. And my favorite was, why are the trains above ground here and why are they so loud? Like, that's like touche.
Yeah. And it's funny too. Like, he's like, sometimes I'll just go see places that I know I'm not going to live in. I just want to experience it and see what it's like. I'm like, it kind of gave you a peek into the mind of a Spencer Knight a little bit, right? He's an interesting cat, mature far beyond his 23 years on the earth.
Yeah, cerebral, calculated, wants to gather all the information before making a decision. I could respect that.
All right, let's get into it. Okay, so every year we've done this at the previous podcast. We've kind of just picked who's going to be in the finals and who's going to hoist the cup. And then we sit for 2 months and we go, I think I had Tampa. I think whatever, Oil, and it kind of just, it does. I decided this year, and there's a reasoning behind it. I think there's going to be a lot of upsets. So I don't want us to be out in the first round. So we're going to do this round by round. Yeah, that's right. We're going the easy route, folks. There's different ways to do this. So let's start in the East. Capitals, Canadiens. I'm going to go with my first upset. I'm going with Montreal in a 7-game series to upset the number 1 seed.
Wow. So I have Washington in 6, but I hope you are right because this is Montreal is one of the teams that I think would be fun to root for as a Cinderella team. It's just, the building is just incredible. We saw it last week when the Hawks were there. I think Washington's going to win, but I don't feel as great about it than I did a few weeks ago just because they really stumbled down the stretch. I'm not sure if there was a lot of attention on the 𝗪liche 𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀 stuff that kind of got them distracted, but also the Logan Thompson injury, not crazy about that. I don't know what his availability is going to be like during the first round of the playoffs, but I still think Washington is the better team. They'll get it done in 6 games.
Hurricanes and Devils, no Hughes, obviously. Carolina showed me something after the whole Rantanen situation. They went on a run. I think they're difficult to play just because of the system that they run. I like the Hurricanes winning that first round matchup.
Yeah, I have Hurricanes in 5 games. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a sweep, just because of how great Carolina is, and just no Jack Hughes for the Devils. Even Dougie Hamilton went through an injury, and so he's been up and down. I think he returned the other day, but I still got Carolina in pretty convincing fashion.
The Battle of Ottawa, Maple Leafs, Senators, Ontario, I should say. Battle of Ontario. Yeah. Let's get our provinces straight here, folks. Brady Tkachuk's health is a little bit of a question mark heading into this one. There's been some bumps and bruises that the Leafs have had to deal with. Austin Matthews earlier in the year. I like Stolarz in net for Montreal. I think Toronto finds a way to win this first round series.
I agree. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, maybe even last year, if these two teams met in the final or in the playoffs, I would expect 6-5 scores, 7-6. But this one I actually think is going to be a very low scoring affair because Ottawa is very defensive minded. Toronto plays much differently under Craig Berube than they did under Sheldon Keefe. They're much more defensively responsible, more 2-1 games. I think Toronto's going to get it done in 6 games. I think they finally have a coaching edge that the players will feel that they have the coaching edge. And also, like you mentioned, the goaltending, 4th all season long in save percentage. Last year, they were 24th. The year prior, they were 10th. The year before that, it's 22nd. They've never really had the goaltending. So I think Toronto finally gets it done because of their back end.
All right. And the Battle of Florida, you got Lightning and Panthers. I'm taking Tampa in this one. I think Panthers' health. Where is Tkachuk? You've got Ekblad out for a couple of games, still serving that suspension. I think there's been some turmoil for Florida as they try to repeat, and so I like the Lightning in this series.
I agree. I have the Lightning in 7 games, but I don't feel great that everyone is also picking Tampa Bay because it feels like we're quickly discounting Florida. But I just think with the Tkachuk question mark, Ekblad not being available for games 1 and 2, the fact that Florida has gone to the Stanley Cup final back-to-back years, I think they could potentially run out of gas. And Tampa feels like they're coming into this series pretty fresh given their last few postseasons. Most goals in the entire NHL. Don't know if I saw that coming. Where I think the biggest difference is going to be in the series is the play of Andrei Vasilevskiy. The last couple playoffs, he has been subpar, like 875 and an 897 playoff or save percentage in the playoffs. His career numbers in the postseason is 920, and that is exactly where he has been this season. Just a notch below Connor Hellebuyck and like his impact with the team. So I expect Vasilevskiy to be on his A game and Tampa Bay to survive and move beyond the first.
So to
round.
recap, the only difference we have is Capitals and Canadians, that series. I have Montreal, yep. You have Washington. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Let's move to the West. Got another upset. Kings, Oilers, 4th straight year that they're going to face each other in the first round. I like LA. Oilers have been struggling. Goaltending still an issue. Injuries an issue. The grind of trying to repeat after you go to 7 games in a Stanley Cup final. The Kings and their magic at home. I'm going LA.
Yeah, I am too. I'm going the Kings, but I'm taking the 7 games, and I think that's just because of the respect that I have for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. The one thing I'll say, if Edmonton is going to win this series, because the Mattias Ekholm injury is a brutal injury for the Oilers. He just changes everything for them, and it's a reason why I think LA is going to win this series. But if there was going to be a path for Edmonton to win this series, it's the fact that Connor McDavid had several weeks off to kind of get fresh for the playoffs. So I think his body is as close to 100% as it's been all season long. So he could single-handedly take over this series himself. And if Draisaitl is kind of in the 80%, 90% range, I think both of them could make a real impact in this series. But they're just a different team. They're a little bit slower than they were last year. And LA is just clicking on all cylinders, especially at home. So I think they get it done this year.
Golden Knights and Wild. I kind of look at this as that Hurricanes Devils series. I like Vegas in this series, and I think it could be somewhat quick work.
Yeah, I do too. I have Vegas in 5 games. I was looking this up, Pat. Vegas's roster, if you look at their roster right now on their website, they have 3 players, only 3 players under 6'1". Like, they are a massive, heavy team, very difficult to play against, complete top to bottom, goaltending, getting healthy at the right time. So I think Vegas is going to make quick work of Minnesota in 5.
Got some great matchups in the first round. This one is at the top of my list. Stars, Avs. Dallas has lost 4 straight. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 not expected back until the second round. I don't know. Did you see any updates on Jason Robertson?
We literally just got one 10 minutes ago as we were recording this, but he is week to week.
Okay,
so he is
that
likely
doesn't look good.
Doesn't look great.
I'm going Avs. Landeskog, emotional lift. I do worry a little bit about their goaltending, but everything else I love about the Avs. I like the Avs to down the Stars in this series.
Yeah, I have Colorado in 6 as well. If you look at some of the underlying numbers for the Dallas Stars since the 4 Nations break, Pat, they're 30th in the entire NHL in expected goals percentage, like taking in goals for and goals against at 5-on-5. So over the last 2 months, they have been one of the worst teams statistically. The 𝗬𝗏𝗏 injury is brutal for them. The Robertson injury does not help either. Tyler Seguin played last game, but he'd been out since December 1st with that injury. So I just think Colorado is one of the best teams in the entire NHL. Crazy how they've revamped their team like the start of the year to what it is now. And they are legitimately one of the best defensive teams in the entire NHL too. So I got Colorado in 6.
Last one, Jets and Blues. Jets have been the best team in the West all season. I'm going with the Jets. I like Hellebuyck over Binnington. Kudos to the Blues, who, and you said it on this podcast a few weeks ago, from the Winter Classic at Wrigley, they flipped the script and went on a tremendous run, and impressive just to make the postseason. But I like the Jets in this series.
I do too. I have the Jets in 6. But if the Blues are going to win this series, they're going to win it based on they have a bigger belief in themselves going into the playoffs than maybe any other team, any other underdog team, just given how this wasn't just like a little 8-game stretch where they got hot. Like, this is a 2-month stretch where they were legitimately one of the best teams in the entire NHL. Very structured defensive team, but so is Winnipeg, and they have the better goaltender. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏 𝗍𝗏𝗏 injury, I don't like that for Winnipeg, but I just think the Jets are a better team. St. Louis has been riding a very abnormally hot shooting percentage, so I think that maybe comes down in this water finds its level. And I think Connor Hellebuyck puts together a better postseason than he did last season.
Wow, another epic CHSN Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast. 32 thoughts might take off. Good Friday, Elliotte Friedman, Kyle Bukowskis, not Charlie Roumeliotis and Pat Boyle. We're there for you, folks. We bring the goods.
And a full hour, which is
hour.
Yeah, that's what's way longer than we usually do, but we deliver for the fans.
Something like that. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. Thank you for watching and listening to the Breakaway Podcast for CHSN. Brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. Enjoy the weekend. Happy Easter to all those celebrating, and we will see you next week.